Stop scrolling for just one moment, because what I'm about to share with you could be the most important thing you hear this entire year. We are already deep into 2026, and if you're being honest with yourself right now, completely uncomfortably honest, you might feel like something is still missing. You set intentions. You made promises to yourself. Maybe you even wrote down goals. But there's a gap, isn't there? A gap between who you are and who you know you're supposed to be. Between where you're standing and where you feel called to go. Here's what nobody is telling you. That gap has nothing to do with your strategy. It has nothing to do with your schedule, your habits, or your morning routine. The gap exists because of something much deeper. Something that no productivity guru, no business coach, and no self-help bestseller has been able to touch. But a fisherman did. A broken, loud-mouthed, terrified fisherman who lived 2,000 years ago. A man who failed publicly. A man who was so afraid at one point that he lied 3 times in a row about knowing the most important person in his life. A man who wept so bitterly afterward that the sound of it has echoed through centuries. And yet this same man became the rock upon which something unshakable was built. He walked on water. He raised the dead. He preached one sermon so powerful that 3,000 lives were transformed in a single day. His name is Peter, Saint Peter. And in this video, we're going to walk through 12 of his most profound teachings. Teachings that are not just spiritual wisdom, they are a complete blueprint for becoming the version of yourself that 2026 is waiting for. I'll tell you the first 6 today, but stay until the end, because teaching 6 especially, that one is going to hit you somewhere you didn't expect. It's the teaching that most people have never heard preached, and it's the exact one that might explain why you keep giving up right before the breakthrough. Let's begin. We need to talk about who Peter actually was before we talk about what he taught. Because if you picture St. Peter as some calm, robed, holy figure with a halo and perfect posture, you have the wrong man entirely. Peter was Simon first, a fisherman from Galilee. Rough hands, loud voice, the kind of man who spoke before he thought, acted before he prayed, and fell before he stood. He was not chosen because he was the best in the room. He was not selected because of his theological training or his emotional intelligence. He was chosen in the middle of an ordinary workday, covered in the smell of fish, probably exhausted and maybe even frustrated from a bad night on the water. And that is exactly why his story belongs to you. Peter is not a distant saint. He is not an unreachable ideal. He is the disciple who represents every single person watching this right now. The person with real potential and real flaws living side by side inside the same body. The person who genuinely loves God but still sometimes buckles under pressure. The person who has tasted moments of pure faith and also moments of total collapse. What makes Peter's teachings extraordinary is not that they came from perfection. They came from the fire of real lived experience. Every word Peter ever taught was forged in failure, tested in storms, and proven in transformation. When Peter tells you something, he is not theorizing. He is testifying. So open your heart right now, because these 12 teachings are not just ancient scripture. They are a living conversation between a man who went through everything, and you, sitting right where you are in 2026, trying to figure out your next step. Teaching 1. Step out of the boat. We start here because everything starts here. Courage before certainty. Most people are waiting until they feel ready. Waiting until the conditions are perfect. Waiting until the fear goes away. And 2026 is passing them by, quietly, without announcement, while they wait. Peter didn't have certainty when he stepped out of that boat. Read the story carefully. There was a storm. The waves were not calm. The wind was not still. And Jesus was standing on the water at a distance. Not right beside the boat, not holding Peter's hand. At a distance. And Peter said, "Lord, if it is you, tell me to come." And Jesus said one word. One word. That was it. No guarantee of smooth water. No promise that the waves would stop. No explanation of how the physics would work. Just come. And Peter stepped out. Teaching 1 for your 2026 is this. The boat is safe, but the boat is not where your miracle is. Whatever boat you are sitting in right now, the comfortable job that's draining your soul, the relationship you've outgrown, the version of yourself that no longer fits. Jesus is standing at a distance saying one word to you. And the step has to happen before the fear disappears. Not after. Before. Stop waiting to feel ready. Readiness is built on the water, not in the boat. Teaching 2. Your failures don't define your future. Now here is where Peter's story gets deeply personal and deeply important. Peter denied Jesus. Not once. 3 times. On the worst night of Jesus' life, the night of his arrest, the night before his crucifixion, Peter stood outside in the cold and told 3 different people that he did not know him. He cursed. He swore. He looked a servant girl in the eye and said, "I don't know the man." And then the rooster crowed. And Peter remembered the words. And he went outside and wept bitterly. That is not a small moment. That is a man completely shattered by his own failure. That is a man who did not just make a mistake. He betrayed the one person he had devoted his entire life to following. Many people would have never recovered from that. Many people carry far smaller failures and let them end their story entirely. But here is what happened next, and this is teaching 2. After the resurrection, Jesus specifically sought Peter out. Not to condemn him, not to remind him of what he did, but to restore him. 3 times Jesus asked Peter, "Do you love me?" 3 times. Once for every denial. And 3 times Peter answered yes. And 3 times Jesus said, "Then feed my sheep." Go. Keep going. Your failure was not your finish line. Your teaching 2 for 2026 is this. The thing you are most ashamed of is not the thing that ends your story. God restores in the same number of rounds that the enemy knocked you down. If you fell 3 times, there are 3 restorations waiting. Stop letting past failure write your future identity. Peter became the rock of the early church after his worst moment, not before it. Your greatest chapter may still be ahead of you, especially if you've already been through the fire. Teaching 3. Feed the people around you. 3 times Jesus told Peter, "Feed my sheep." And we just talked about the restoration, but let's slow down on the actual instruction, because it is profound and it is practical. Feed my sheep. Jesus did not say, "Build your platform." Jesus did not say, "Grow your audience." He did not say, "Build wealth, secure your legacy, win the argument, or prove the people who doubted you wrong." He said, "Feed, nourish, give something to the people around you that they actually need." There is a version of ambition that is entirely self-directed. It is consumed with getting recognition, getting success, getting to the top. And that version of ambition will hollow you out from the inside. It will give you everything you said you wanted and leave you emptier than when you started. But Peter's teaching 3 reorients the entire direction of your purpose. In 2026, ask yourself this question. Who am I feeding? Whose life is genuinely better because I exist in it? What am I pouring into the people around me? My family, my community, the people who follow me, the people who look up to me. Greatness in the kingdom is always measured by what you give, not what you gather. And the beautiful paradox is this. The more intentionally you feed others, the more abundantly you yourself are filled. This is not just spiritual poetry. This is a law that works. Start feeding. Start giving. Make 2026 the year your life becomes a source, not just a reservoir. Teaching 4. Don't stay on the mountain. This teaching is one that the modern church rarely preaches, and I need you to hear it clearly, because it might be the thing that is secretly keeping you stuck. There was a moment on a high mountain where Peter witnessed the transfiguration. Jesus was transformed before his eyes, glowing, speaking with Moses and Elijah. It was the most spectacular spiritual experience a human being had ever seen. And Peter's immediate response? Let us build 3 shelters here. Let us stay. He wanted to capture the moment. He wanted to build a structure around the experience and remain in it forever. He didn't want to come down. He didn't want to go back to the valley, back to the crowds, back to the suffering people and the hard work and the messy reality of ordinary life. And the voice from the cloud didn't say, "Yes, stay." It said, "This is my son. Listen to him." And when they looked up, the moment had passed. And Jesus said, Get up. Let's go down. Teaching 4 is this: spiritual highs are real, they are necessary, and they are not your destination. The mountain is for revelation. The valley is for transformation. You cannot live on retreat. You cannot build a permanent home in the worship experience, the conference high, the moment of prayer that felt electric. Those moments exist to equip you for what is waiting below. If you have been living from spiritual high to spiritual high, but your actual daily life, your actual relationships, your actual habits remain unchanged, this teaching is for you. Come down from the mountain. Carry what you received up there and apply it down here. The mission is in the valley. Teaching 5. Walk toward what scares you. We already talked about Peter stepping out of the boat, but let's go one layer deeper. Because what happened after he stepped out is the real teaching. He started to sink. He looked at the waves, he felt the wind, and fear overtook faith and he began to go under. And he cried out, "Lord, save me." And immediately Jesus reached out his hand and caught him. And then Jesus said something that we need to sit with. He said, "You of little faith, why did you doubt?" Now here is what I want you to notice. Jesus did not say, "You of no faith." He said little faith. Peter still had faith. It just got interrupted by fear. And the miracle is that even sinking, even halfway under, he still called out. And the hand was still there. Teaching 5 for 2026 is this: faith in motion always beats perfect faith in stillness. Peter's sinking walk on water was still more powerful than every disciple who stayed dry and safe in the boat. You are allowed to be afraid. You are allowed to wobble. You are allowed to feel the wind. But keep walking. Keep your eyes moving toward Jesus even when the waves are visible. And if you start to sink, cry out. Don't drown in silence. Cry out. The hand is right there. What is the thing in 2026 that scares you the most? Walk toward it. Trembling counts as walking. Teaching 6. Let the nets down again. And now we arrive at the teaching I promised you. The one most people have never heard. The one that I believe is the most relevant teaching for where you are right now in the season of your life. Before Peter followed Jesus, before any miracle, before any sermon, before any transformation, there was one defining moment. Peter had fished all night and caught nothing. All night. Empty hands. Empty nets. The exhaustion of trying completely without result. And then a carpenter, not a fisherman, a carpenter, stood on the shore and told him to let the nets down again. On the same water. In the same boat. After the same failure. And everything in Peter's experience said, "This is pointless. I'm a professional. I know this water. I have already tried." And yet, Peter said something that changed his life forever. He said, "But because you say so, I will let down the nets." Not because the conditions changed. Not because he suddenly felt confident. Not because the evidence suggested it would work. Because you say so. The nets went down. And the catch was so massive it began to break the nets. So massive that they had to call a second boat. So massive that Peter fell to his knees overwhelmed. Teaching 6 is this: your most significant breakthrough is often waiting on the other side of the attempt you already gave up on. The business you closed. The relationship you stopped investing in. The prayer you stopped praying. The dream you quietly buried because you tried and it didn't work. 2026 is asking you, will you let the nets down again? Not because the situation looks different, but because he says so. Because something in your spirit is nudging you back toward the very thing you walked away from. The water didn't change. The nets didn't change. The only thing that changed was obedience. And that was enough. That is the first 6 teachings of St. Peter. And if you've been watching carefully, you'll notice something. These are not gentle suggestions. These are surgical interventions for the exact struggles that most people carry silently into every new year and never address. But we are only halfway through. Teachings 7 through 12 go even deeper. They go into the places most people are afraid to look: comparison, suffering, fear of speaking, isolation, and the hardest one of all, dying to who you used to be so that who you're meant to become can finally breathe. Don't go anywhere. The second half of this is where everything changes. Teachings 7 through 12 are not about what you do. They are about who you are becoming. They deal with the invisible architecture of your inner life, the places nobody sees, the battles nobody claps for, the transformations that happen in silence before they ever show up in your story. Stay with me, because teaching 12 especially, I need you to be ready for it. It is the hardest one, and it is the most necessary one. And by the time we get there, I think you'll understand why everything in your life has been building toward exactly this moment. Let's continue. Teaching 7. Clean hands aren't enough. Guard your heart. There was a moment when the religious leaders of Peter's time confronted Jesus about hand-washing rituals, about external cleanliness, about the appearance of holiness. And Jesus responded with something that cut straight through the performance and landed on the real issue entirely. It's not what goes into a person from the outside that corrupts them. It's what comes out from the inside. Peter heard this, and later, in his own letters he wrote to communities of believers scattered and under pressure, he returned to this truth again and again. He wrote about laying aside malice, laying aside deceit, laying aside hypocrisy and envy and slander, not as a list of rules, but as an act of inner gardening, as a conscious, deliberate decision to tend to what is growing in the hidden soil of your heart. Here is Teaching 7 for your 2026, and I need you to receive this honestly. You can have clean hands and a corrupt heart at the same time. You can look disciplined on the outside, the early mornings, the fasting, the church attendance, the social media posts about faith, while privately nursing bitterness, rehearsing resentment, and feeding jealousy in the quiet moments when nobody is watching. And that internal corruption will eventually surface. It always does. It leaks into your relationships. It poisons your prayers. It makes your success feel hollow because it was built on top of unresolved rot. The question for this season is not, how do I look to others? The question is, what is actually growing inside me right now? What thoughts do I return to when the room is empty and the phone is down and no one can see me? That inner world is your real world. Guard it. Tend to it. Because out of it flows everything. Every relationship, every decision, every outcome 2026 will produce in your life. Clean hands are not enough. Go deeper. Guard your heart. Teaching 8. Stop asking what others are doing. Comparison kills calling. This teaching arrives in one of the most quietly devastating moments in all of Peter's story. And I want you to picture it clearly, because the scene will stay with you. After the resurrection, after the restoration, after Jesus had recommissioned Peter with purpose and spoken powerfully over his future, Peter turned around. He looked at the disciple John walking behind them and he asked Jesus, "Lord, what about him?" After everything, after the denial and the restoration, after walking on water and witnessing the transfiguration and receiving the keys of the kingdom, after the most profound personal recommissioning in human history, Peter's first instinct was to look sideways, to compare, to ask, but what about him? What's his path going to look like? Is his journey easier than mine? And Jesus said something that should echo through every room you walk into in 2026. He said, "What is that to you? You, follow me." That word "you" is underlined in eternity. You. Not them. Not him. Not her. Not the person whose life looks more blessed, more favored, more effortless from the outside. You follow me. Your path is yours. Your calling is not in competition with anyone else's calling. Your timeline is not running against anyone else's timeline. Teaching 8 is this. Comparison is not just emotionally damaging, it is spiritually dangerous. Every moment you spend measuring your progress against someone else's highlight reel is a moment stolen from your own God-given direction. Social media in 2026 is a comparison machine running at full speed 24 hours a day. And if you are not deliberately, intentionally guarding your gaze, it will redirect your entire life towards someone else's destination. You were not called to their path. You were called to yours. Stop looking sideways. Fix your eyes forward. And when the question rises in your heart, "But what about them?" hear the answer clearly. What is that to you? You follow me. Teaching 9. Suffering sharpens, it doesn't destroy. Now we arrive at the teaching that is hardest to receive, but perhaps the most urgent for this particular season of your life. Peter wrote these words, and I want you to feel the weight of them. Dear friends, do not be surprised at the fiery ordeal that has come on you to test you, as though something strange were happening to you. Do not be surprised. Don't act as though this is an anomaly. Don't look at your suffering and conclude that God has abandoned you, or that your faith has failed, or that you must have done something terribly wrong to deserve this season. And then Peter said something even more startling. He said, rejoice. Rejoice, because you are participating in something that has purpose. Because the fire that is touching you right now is not the fire of destruction, it is the fire of refinement. Peter knew what he was talking about. He did not write these words from a comfortable room. He wrote them as a man who had been imprisoned, beaten, rejected, and was ultimately heading toward martyrdom. He had no reason to spiritualize suffering from a safe distance. He was in it. And from inside it, he was telling others, this is not the end of you. This is the making of you. Teaching 9 for 2026 is this: the hard season you are in, or the one that is coming, is not a punishment. It is a process. Gold does not become gold by sitting in the sun. It becomes gold by going through fire. And the temperature of the fire is always proportional to the value of what is being refined. If your life has felt like a furnace lately, ask yourself not why this is happening to you, but what this is producing in you. Patience, depth, empathy. Unshakable faith that was never tested before cannot anchor you in the storms ahead. The suffering is sharpening something in you that comfort never could. Don't run from it. Don't numb it. Don't rush past it. Let it do its complete work. Because what comes out on the other side of this fire, that version of you, is who 2026 has been waiting for. Teaching 10. Speak with authority, not anxiety. After the day of Pentecost, after the Holy Spirit descended and everything changed, Peter stood up. The same Peter who weeks earlier could not admit to knowing Jesus in front of a servant girl now stood in front of thousands of people and opened his mouth. And what came out was not nervousness. It was not apology. It was not the voice of a man afraid of how he would be received. He spoke with complete, settled, spirit-filled authority. And 3,000 people were transformed by a single sermon. What changed? Not Peter's education, not his background, not his social standing. What changed was that he stopped speaking from his own capacity and started speaking from his commission. He stopped asking himself, who am I to say this? And started walking in, I have been sent to say this. Teaching 10 is this: there is a voice inside you that has been silenced by anxiety for too long. A voice that has something real and necessary to say to your family, to your community, to the people in your sphere of influence. And anxiety has been sitting on that voice, telling you that you're not qualified enough, not eloquent enough, not credentialed enough to speak. But Peter was a fisherman, and he shook a city with his words, not because he was impressive, because he was commissioned. In 2026, your voice matters. Your testimony matters. The thing you have lived through and survived and learned from. Someone else desperately needs to hear it. Speak, not from performance, not from ego, but from the settled place of knowing, I have something to give, and silence is not humility. Silence is disobedience dressed up as modesty. Speak with authority. The world in 2026 is desperate for voices that carry something real. Teaching 11. Community is your armor. Peter never did anything alone. And this is not accidental. It is deeply, deliberately instructive. When he walked on water, he called out to Jesus. When he preached at Pentecost, he stood up with the 11. When he was imprisoned, the church gathered and prayed without ceasing on his behalf. When he struggled theologically, he sat in council with other leaders. The entire architecture of Peter's life was built on interconnection, accountability, and shared mission. And in his letters, he made it explicit. He wrote about loving one another deeply, about being like living stones, not a single stone standing alone, but stones fitted together, each one supporting the other, forming something that no individual stone could be on its own. Teaching 11 is this: isolation is one of the enemy's most effective strategies in 2026, and it is working. People are more digitally connected and more genuinely lonely than at any point in human history. And lonely people make vulnerable decisions. Lonely people are easier to deceive, easier to discourage, and easier to destroy. You were not designed for solitary faith. You were designed for community. Real community, not perfect community, not comfortable community, but honest, committed, covenant community where people know your real name and your real struggle and show up anyway. If you have been pulling away from people, from your church, your family, your trusted circle, Teaching 11 is asking you to stop. Reach back. Let people in. Your armor is not just prayer. Your armor is also the people God has placed around you, and you need to be wearing it. Teaching 12. Die to the old version of yourself. We have arrived. The final teaching. The hardest one. The most important one. Jesus told Peter directly, "When you were young, you dressed yourself and went where you wanted. But when you are old, someone else will dress you and lead you where you do not want to go." And the scripture says Jesus said this to indicate the kind of death Peter would die, a death of complete surrender, of complete relinquishment of self-direction. But here is what I need you to understand. That death began long before the physical end. It began the moment Peter stepped out of the boat. It deepened every time he chose obedience over comfort. It grew more complete every time he chose the valley over the mountain, the mission over the moment, feeding others over building his own platform. Peter died to himself continuously, and that continuous dying is exactly what made him the rock, not his strength, his surrender. Teaching 12 for your 2026 is this: there is a version of you that needs to die this year. Not your dreams, those need to live. Not your potential, that needs to be unleashed. But the version of you that is too proud to ask for help. The version that is too afraid to be seen failing. The version that is still holding on to offenses from years ago. The version that keeps going back to the boat, back to the old life, back to the old identity, because it's familiar even though it no longer fits. That version of you has to go. And it will not go quietly. The old self never does. It argues. It negotiates. It reminds you of how much you've already sacrificed. It tells you that you've changed enough already. But if you listen closely beneath all that noise, you'll hear something quieter and truer. You'll hear the voice that said come, still saying it, still calling you forward, still standing on the water at a distance, asking you to leave the boat one more time. Die to who you were, so you can become who you're meant to be. 12 teachings. 1 fisherman. A life that was broken and rebuilt and broken and rebuilt until it became something that 2,000 years could not erase. And now the question lands on you. Personally, specifically, unavoidably. Who are you becoming in 2026? Not what are you achieving. Not what are you building or earning or accumulating. Who are you becoming? Because here is the truth that Peter's entire life declares. The becoming always comes before the building. The inner transformation always precedes the outer impact. You cannot give what you have not first received. You cannot lead people to places you have not first been willing to go yourself. So here is your challenge. 12 teachings, 12 commitments. Write them down. Not as a list to admire, as a mirror to return to. Every week, come back to this list and ask yourself, which of these teachings am I actively living? And which one am I avoiding? Step out of the boat. Let your failures fuel your future instead of define it. Feed the people around you. Come down from the mountain and do the work in the valley. Walk toward what scares you. Let the nets down again in the place where you already failed. Guard your heart, not just your image. Stop comparing your path to everyone else's. Let the suffering sharpen you. Open your mouth and speak what you've been given. Build and protect your community. And die, daily, deliberately, completely, to the old version of yourself. That is 12. That is the blueprint. Not a self-help checklist. A spiritual transformation roadmap drawn by the most unlikely man in history. A fisherman who proved that the most broken vessel, surrendered completely, can carry the most extraordinary cargo. 2026 is not over. It has barely begun. And you are still here, still watching, still hungry for something more than ordinary. That hunger is not an accident. That is the same voice that said come to Peter on the water. It is saying it to you right now. Father, I want to pray right now for every single person who has watched this video to its end. Lord, you know exactly where they are. You know what they carried into this year. You know the failures they are still carrying shame about, the dreams they quietly buried, the prayers they stopped praying because the answer seemed too long in coming. You know the suffering they are in the middle of right now, the kind they haven't told anyone about yet. And just as you sought Peter out after his worst moment, not to condemn him but to restore him, I ask that you seek out every person watching this right now. Meet them exactly where they are. Call them by name. Remind them that their story is not finished, that the nets can go down again, that the water can be walked on, that the most broken chapter of their life is not the final chapter. Give them the courage to step out of the boat this week. Give them the strength to let the nets down in the place they already gave up on. Give them community to carry them when their own faith wavers. And give them the grace, the uncommon, undeserved, overwhelming grace, to die to who they were so that who they are becoming can finally, fully breathe. In the name of the one who stood on the water and said one word, come. Amen. If this video moved something in you today, don't let it stay a feeling. Let it become a decision. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Come back to these 12 teachings throughout this year. And remember, Peter didn't become the rock in one moment. He became it in 1,000 small acts of obedience, surrender, and choosing to get back up. You can do the same. Starting today.